Here we go. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second ever, well, technically third because of the time zone thing, but second meeting ever for SIG chairs and tech leads for Kubernetes. My name is Paris. I'm going to get us through this agenda today. We definitely have a packed agenda. And it looks like at least 15 of us on the line today, and I know several others that are probably going to be joining later as well. Overlapping meetings, of course, 'tis the Kubernetes life. So let me copy and paste the agenda one more time into chat, just in case the folks that joined recently don't have it. And of course, we do have a code of conduct. As always, be excellent to each other. I think this is no stranger to anybody on this phone call right now. But since this is a large group, do me a favor and try to flag us down if you want to talk about something. But yes, we do want you to talk about things. So your voice is encouraged here. So definitely still flag us down. And then we did in January do intros. What I wanted to do this time was if you didn't give an intro at all on either of the calls, whether it was a Tuesday or Thursday January call, I wanted to give a couple minutes to folks to do intros to have a minute. Did anybody, is this anyone's new, or excuse me, is this anyone's first chair TL call that would like to give an intro? Saad.
Hello, I think a lot of you know me. My name is Saad. I'm SIG Storage lead.
One of the questions that we asked last time, Saad, was what's the best way to get in contact with you? So like Slack or GitHub notifications.
Email.
Email? Okay, cool. No, that's cool. And I'll talk about that topic in 1 second. Does anybody else want to do an intro? I think I see a lot of the same faces. Jonathan?
Hi, I'm one of the co-chairs for SIG Service Catalog. And I guess if you need to get in touch with me, the best way is probably on Slack.
Awesome. I think we have a couple others too. Does anybody else want to do an intro? We can always skip too and do intros at the end for those.
I'll go for it. I was
Okay.
on the last ones. I'm Bob Killen, or Mr. Bobby Tables. I recently sort of took Paris's position as chair of contributor experience. The best way to get a hold of me is Slack.
Paris
Yeah.
is excited about this.
Hey, Mo.
Hi. I guess I can go next. So I'm one of the co-chairs for SIG Auth. I'm sorry, I was traveling the last time you guys were having meetings, so I couldn't attend. Slack is definitely the best way to reach me. Please don't email me. I will never see it.
All right. Anybody else?
I'll go too. Hey everyone, I'm Caitlin, SIG Docs chair as of today, so I'm really excited to be here. Best place to reach me, definitely Slack. I will also respond on email.
Yes. When did that happen? Is that like just like fresh off the press? Yes.
Yeah, like
that's
1
awesome.
hour.
Welcome. Anyway, sorry. Anybody else want to do an intro?
I can do it. I'm one of the co-lead of the SIG scheduling, and the best way to reach out to me is Slack.
Okay.
Okay, I can go next.
Hey.
Hi, Shane. I'm a lead of the data protection work group, so you can reach me on Slack.
Lots of Slacks. We did this in January as well for, I think the total was 30 plus of you. You can see on the front page of the agenda, Taylor, GitHub handle only Dole, did a little contact list when he did the transcription services, went through and clicked, who said email, who said Slack, so we could get this kind of preferred contact list. So we'll do that again for those of you that just said that, and then chase the other chairs and TLs down so that we can eventually get ourselves a nice baseline of communications. As everybody knows here, the project is humongous, both upstream and the entire ecosystem. So it's important you as chairs understand where you're getting some of your information and what's expected of you. So now that we've done intros and things like that, let's just do really quick announcements. I know we've got Bob on the line from Contributor Summit team. Bob, do you want to take a couple minutes and talk about the first two bullets?
Sure, one sec.
Yeah.
Really, the big thing is the CFP closed, so we are no longer accepting submissions for the summit. And if you have not registered, please do so. We're at, I think it's like 65% capacity already, and we still have, I believe, 7 weeks till then. And right now we only have about 22 chairs and tech leads that are registered.
All right.
I can drop links into the doc as soon as I actually find it.
Yeah, no worries. We do have the reg link in there. Well, actually, it's just the link to the site where you can navigate the registration on your own. And then we also have the SIG meet and greet link in there as well. So cool. Any questions about the Contributor Summit, y'all? This is Amsterdam, by the way.
Meet and greet submission is still open?
Yes, I think
okay.
There are 14 people that have signed up for it.
Thank you.
And there's 22 of you registered to date for Amsterdam. All right. Thanks, Bob.
So I do have a question on SIG meet and greet. Is there a few people in the data protection group want to have a place so they can talk and ask questions? So I thought this meet and greet would be a great place for that. So I just need to fill out this form. Then we will have is it like a table, or how does this work?
Yep, you will get a table. It will have your working group name on it, the little stand. You'll also have buttons that will say your working group. This is generally a time for new contributors and people that are interested in possibly joining, for you to have discussions with them. But you're free to use it for general discussion as well. Just be aware that there will probably be people that are not familiar with the working group there as well.
So I think some folks are not even contributors yet. So how do they even get in to this?
Shing, would it make sense to kind of have that under the SIG storage table maybe?
Yeah, that would work actually.
Okay, so I think I've already submitted one for SIG storage, and I think it would be great to have you there as representative for that group.
Sure, yeah, that would be great.
Okay, perfect. I'll reach out to you offline.
Okay, thanks.
Just one little note on that. If you do have people that are not Kubernetes org members yet, and you want them to come to the summit, you can sponsor them. Mm-hmm. Please just send an email to community@kubernetes.io, just with their email and contact information, just saying that yes, you're sponsoring them to attend the active contributor track.
Okay, but how many people can one person sponsor? Is there a limit, or because I'm not sure how many people.
There's not really a hard limit or anything like that. So far, it tends to be just ones and twos. But if you have if it's not 30 people or something like that.
Probably not that many, but okay. So I'll find out and we'll ask more questions later.
That would be a fantastic problem to have.
Bob, what was the instructions on how people sponsor non-org members? Did you see something?
Yeah, send an email to community@kubernetes.io, just saying, hi, I'm the SIG chair or lead for this group. We have a couple people that are not org members that we would like to attend the active contributor track, and if possible, provide their emails.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right. Cool. And any last questions about Contributor Summit? All right. And I'm about to time box us here. So the next announcement is during one of the steering meetings, I proposed a health check that's similar to an Apache PMC style roll call. I'm not sure if folks on the line are familiar with the way Apache runs theirs, what runs their projects, where it's PMCs, which is similar to a chair, tech lead combo, if you will. They go to the board, the Apache board, every so often and give just like an update about themselves, about their community group. It's not like an intro like that you give at KubeCon. It's more about like us as like upstream developers and like the health of your community and things like that. I wanted to flag it here because obviously this is very pertinent to this group. It's about you, and I wanted to get your thoughts on it. We don't necessarily have time to go into great detail about it now with the current agenda, but I'm going to put it on the open discussion at the end so we can have some other questions, concerns, comments about it, but we can take a few now. So does anybody have, I see Zach raised. Zach?
So how does this differ from like regularly scheduled sessions during the weekly community meeting?
Well, technically not weekly anymore. Now it's monthly.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah. And this would differ based on, you can see some of the questions in there on the GitHub issue. Actually, let me click it because I'm sharing my screen. Why not? So here's some of the example type questions that I'm thinking about. So like, what's it like being a chair for this group? Talking about how active you are, like what's going on, how we is steering, like how can we help you all, not just you as a chair, but I mean, yes, that included, but also your group as a whole, kind of getting closer to you all, both personally and professionally. I mean, not necessarily personally, but I guess on a more one-on-one basis, and just opening those lines of communication, the types of programs that you're running. And a lot of that will also flow through this meeting too. So this is just establishing way more communication boundaries, I think, between our groups, and also just helping in general.
One quick follow-up. Is this to the open steering meeting or to the closed steering committee meeting?
TBD. I mean, that's undiscussed, a part of the proposal right now. The idea is no more meetings. So it would be either like I see, like I already see a lot of reactions to that. It's like, no, I'm not, this isn't creating a meeting. This would be either molding something that's currently there already, whether it's the current steering committee meeting, whether it's the community meeting, whatever, but just adding this in some way, or maybe we as steering committee members come to your meeting, something like that, TBD. So this is pretty fresh, but I at least wanted to get it out there for you all to comment and do your thing. Well, we could do like one more question on this. Question, concern, or comment, and then we can parking lot it. All right, hold on one sec too. I want to share my screen a better way. Hold on one sec. All right. So let's go to the last meeting recap. Talk a little bit about that. Does anybody want to freely share some takeaways that they had from the last meeting that they attended, whether it was the Tuesday or Thursday call in January? I put mine there. I'll link to a GitHub issue. This is what I was using to follow up with. But just some of the summaries and takeaways that I had from the meeting. We talked a lot about, again, the baseline communication, Slack being the overwhelming yes, especially on certain moderated channels. A lot of people saying no to GitHub, but there were a lot of people that said yes to it as well. So obviously the takeaway here is that we're not going to necessarily win, so to speak, but if we come up with a baseline and everybody understands that, I think we'll at least have a leg up than our current situation. Also, much of the conversation was around the chair job itself, succession strategies, challenges, what people want to see from upcoming meetings. So in a very meta way, we had some meta conversations. So in the same note about the chair job itself, what I did was, if I can find here it is. What I did was went and created sort of a chair job description. And I took this directly from the SIG Governance docs that we have right now. This is, again, not currently laid out like this in the governance document, but I was curious as to like, hey, what would a job description look like if we were trying to, quote, hire for a chair, right? And a lot of the conversation last month was around how we perceive the chair role, and some of us even perceive it differently based off SIG. Some of us were talking about PRing role books of a chair for that special SIG into a role book somewhere in your charter, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to open up the conversation about this and any thoughts that you have regarding the chair job itself, or are there things missing from this that you're like, hey, wow, like I do other stuff than this? Or is there anything on here that you're like, I don't do any of this at all?
There's definitely one thing that I don't know if this is covered in any of the topics on there, and that at least in Service Catalog, the SIGs kind of just maintain, I don't know, all of the oral history, spoken word knowledge that's sort of necessary to run the SIG, but might not be immediately obvious to new contributors.
So do you feel like that's a challenge for like future, what would be a challenge for future SIG chairs?
Yeah, because like a lot of the stuff is written down in places, but in like, I mean, this is like sensitive information and you know, passwords and stuff. And if like the co-chairs got hit by a bus, then you know, bad things would happen. Yep. But there's no like official process to pass that torch, so we're just kind of winging it.
Okay. Anybody else? I have a follow-up to that, Jonathan, too, so I'm not necessarily like sidebarring you. There is a follow-up to that.
I've got a tip for that, but I got to look it up, so I'll be back.
Yeah, that's why I think, George, I think we're both on the same page, so that's why I was like, look it up and we'll sidebar that, sort of, not necessarily answer, but kind of a tip there. Anybody else have any comments like, hey, I do something else that's not listed on this?
Could I ask a question?
Sure, yeah, please.
What does it mean to not use private comms to talk to folks? Like, who are we talking to? And what's the, like,
in this case, this would be business of the, you know, I'm saying this in like Richard Nixon quotes, like business of the SIG. So like other SIG members, you know, talking about, you know, feature development or maybe handling of other contributors or contributor related relations, things along those lines. And that's mainly for code of conduct reasons. And obviously transparency and all the good stuff that comes with open source.
Yeah, I was just curious because I tend to often bounce ideas off folks that are just like, they never necessarily come to
Yeah. No, I mean, that's, yeah.
Like, I don't want to spam the SIG Auth channel with random ideas.
Yeah, no. I mean, I'm sure they would like them too, no. But no, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, I see your point. Anybody else? So if we were to PR this in as a roll book, do you think you would LGTM it? And no, this is not necessarily a question you have to go on the spot, but think about it that way, right? just because you hear again from Jonathan, like, hey, we might do something differently in service catalog, it's kind of like, okay, let's draw out some of those differences, because some people might want to know about those and, you know, how to do that thing or something like that, and we can collaborate in that way. So any other comments about the chair role itself, and like role books and what a job description would look like, or expectations of a chair, anything like that? All right. And then so to Jonathan's point, and I don't know if this is what George is digging up, last call, we did have a discussion about getting more sort of onboarding documents together. There is currently the document that's the SIG working group lifecycle doc that I tell new chairs just to reverse engineer almost, meaning like, hey, you're going to need access to all of this. If you need it at creation, you're going to need it now as a chair. But there's other ways that we can obviously present that information. George, is that what you were alluding to, or did you have a new tip or another tip to share?
Yeah, I was going to say there's the lifecycle document, which I'm linking here. And in absence, I would just say, just go through it again and make sure that it still makes sense for your SIG. Here it is right here. Because a lot of the things in creating a SIG are stuff that you kind of need to maintain over time. So, you know, I don't know, let's say we were doing a handover between Bob and Paris or something. We would say, all right, let's just go through these, even whether you're a SIG or a working group, they kind of make sense, right? Like ensure all SIG chairs, tech leads are community members. Okay, is everyone in the org? You know, send an email to steering committee to scope the SIG, you know. You could look at that and say, all right, you know, we're doing a handover. It probably doesn't hurt to, you know, let steering know, probably the Kubernetes, like see the last step, announce a new SIG on Kubernetes-dev. You can adapt this to be like, hey, everybody, we're having a leadership changeover. So a lot of the creating a SIG and things like that is also something that like you can kind of audit that you're doing anyway regularly, because you kind of should be, I think, according to the governance, which is the other document that I was going to link to.
Oh, I have something fun that we recently created. It's more specific, I guess, for release managers, but it's a bunch of links in a GitHub template about how to gain access to stuff. And it is in the chat.
That would be cool if we could all share, if we could share that as well. So I'm taking hold on. So if anybody on the line right now has any onboarding documents for chairs, tech leads, or I don't know if maybe even other roles, what the heck, right? Let's collect those, if you, not now, but either in this agenda or in Slack or something, copy and paste your links, and then we can use that to share and build off of too.
Making this a GitHub template with the checkboxes and stuff, that's brilliant, Stephen. Yeah. That is a great idea.
It's because I usually end up doing it, and I was like, I have to figure out the things every time.
I'm saying if we had something like this that was, you know, new SIG co-chair for, you know, at GitHub handle and had something similar.
Yeah, we could probably split the difference. But if you want me to work on something like that, we could probably split the difference between the release manager thing, which is like probably the most access you could have outside of being a GitHub admin, and the new contributor workflow.
Yeah, if you can you file an issue on this, and I have someone in mind that's been looking for something to do along this lines.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Potentially walking through with Caitlin or something like that might be a great thing to sort of test some of this stuff too.
All right, sorry.
Feel free to assign me that issue, Stephen, if you file it today.
All right.
Sounds good.
All right. So that was pretty much last meeting. We had a lot. We talked about a lot. Does anybody else have any thoughts, feels, questions, concerns about January's meeting that they want to discuss now? or other takeaways? All right, cool. So last 30 is dedicated to a new topic, which is growing our contributors. What types of contributors are you looking for right now as well? So I wanted to kind of just do a round robin of either programs that you're involved with growing your contributors, special sauce that you are currently using, any other activities that you currently have going on to grow either a certain type of contributor or just your contributors in general. So is anyone dying to go first? No one's dying to go first. I'll go. If you I mean, you know I can talk.
I mean, I can do it.
Yeah.
I was trying to be silent this one, but laying in the cut. All right. So yeah, so for SIG release, we have a lot of different things that we do day to day, whether it's the members of the release team or new release manager associates, which grow up to become branch managers and eventually patch release team members. So I think we have some like ladders in place. I mean, the idea being that if you're on the release team, you know, maybe you're shadowing and then you eventually evolve into a role lead, and then maybe you take on shadowing for the release team lead role, and then eventually the release team lead. So I think that what I've been seeing at least is people who have essentially attained their roles, but are not necessarily mentoring through the ladder. And I'm trying to figure out like ways to attack that. Like it seems that a lot of people are considering the role as in, you know, the scope of an individual contributor, where I have this growing expectation that the people who are at the top of the ladder will be acting kind of as people lead managers, right, as well, and nurturing people up through that. So I'm noodling on that, and I haven't really figured it out. I'm guilty myself, trying to find issues that people can get involved with. I find it to be kind of tricky on the release side because some of the issues require, you know, intense knowledge of these random 1800 line bash scripts and things like that, or access to a thing that you may not have access to until you move through the ladder. So trying to figure out how to chunk off work that is you know, time boxed and measurable and all that good stuff, SMART goals, yada yada yada. What looks like a help wanted versus a good first issue for us. And sometimes there are things that I try to file issues. I try to get the issue logged and flag a team on GitHub, but there are a lot of times that I will look at the issue and go, well, I'm about to file this, and the amount of effort that it would take to file it and describe it in vivid detail enough for someone to pick up is about equivalent to the amount of effort it would take for me to just do it. So that's something I'm working through too. Yeah, that's the tweet. That's me.
I will say if the effort is about the same, then it might be long-term worth it to have someone else do it.
Oh, he just said it's about the same to write it up. Not that it's about the same to write it up, find someone to work on it, check their work, guide them through the review process to final merge.
Exactly. So you know, some of the things are like, if this is done wrong, maybe we break a release, right?
Sorry, I'm also trying to take notes. I apologize. I'm trying to get everything. All right.
All right. Just a quick response to Stephen. Just to affirm what you're saying, we just lived through the same thing last night in SIG Docs. the alias that we added for RBAC yesterday ended up being unexpectedly thorny. And like I wrote up the issue and I was like, oh, this would be a good first issue if it wasn't priority critical urgent. So like part of it, like I really gave some thought about whether to let that sit and see if we could get a fix within the next like few hours. But because it was touching security content, I was like, no, but just plus one that is like a real dilemma and a real like resource question.
David, can you do me a favor and add your comment too? I'm trying to like take notes and look at the time at the same time, and I missed yours. And I want to make sure I capture it. And same with you, Gwen, too. In there under the discussion point.
I mostly said I think it is worth it to consider the long-term positive outcomes of writing down an issue so that the new person can do it. And David's counterpoint to that, I actually don't want to speak for him, so.
Yeah, I'm not saying I would never do it. There's certainly a lot of things we put on the backlog, but I am just saying I understand what Stephen was describing, where, yeah, 20 minutes to write it up. It's going to take you 20 minutes to fix it. But when you add in the time to find someone, because there's not always someone who's interested, and then take it through a review cycle, you're looking at, I can get the fix in 20 minutes, or I can get the fix in 20 days. May or may not make the release.
I mean, the one upside of doing it yourself is that what I try to do when issues like that pop up is excruciatingly document them, both in the issue and in the repo, so that when it pops up again, someone's like, oh, well, can I work? Like, yes, I've written this in explicit detail for you to follow instructions. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. But it is tricky trying to manage doing that and allowing for people to take up that work versus getting it done.
And then any other, oh, geez, just in my hand. Any other SIG or working group examples of how you're growing contributors? And it doesn't need to be like a program, by the way. I mean, just this is
sorry, a comment on the sort of the last thing with the help wanting good first issue. The one thing, like, this isn't necessarily what I've seen in Contribex, because we've been, well, we could definitely be better with help wanted and things like that, but like, we have lots of good first issues that are, small little like markdown fixes and things like that, but like, there is very little in sort of the middle ground without like for people to like tackle something without getting further involved in the SIG, hopping in Slack and getting a little bit more like, there's no sort of middle issue that I've seen for people to easily progress from, say, just a member to a reviewer or approver in a specific area. Like, scoping that has been very difficult, and that's just something I've seen more across the board.
Anybody else? Contributor is also doing the release method as well. I mean, in our sub-projects, we've realized that almost all of the sub-projects have some kind of team and some kind of, each person has some kind of role in that team. So like events and triage, and I think it's like we have marketing now, 6 teams. And we've been trying to roll with the teams. And also, Stephen, I'm hearing also what you're saying about the nurturing elements. I hear you very loud on that one. So we can, if you want to vent to me, I'm here. And I think we're also trying to do our best to. In Contribex, we see the same issues with, like what Bob mentioned about how it's very hard to scope that middle ground work of giving the person all the access in the world and giving them a nice, solid project. Zach, what about sharing some of the stuff that you do in Docs? Because I think you all do some good stuff there.
Oh, well, thank you. I think that's partially an illusion. But I think, no, we like our release, the release part of Docs is exceptionally good at self-training and self-perpetuating. And that's largely the work of Jim Angel, who really took a strong, well, he took a deep project to make sure that the rulebook for the Docs release component was very good, and to make sure in subsequent releases that Docs release leads were updating the rulebook based with how things broke that cycle. And so that's the culture of the Docs release team is very much about self-improvement, about like self-nomination and self-training. So like the release component of Docs is excellent at gaining and cultivating new contributors. I think likewise the blog with Caitlin's leadership as the head of the blog working group, that the way that the blog functions now is pretty tight. And the way that blog contributors come in, there's a lot less like active cultivation needed for the blog. People tend to self-nominate as blog contributors. Where I think that we fall down in Docs is that frankly we need technical writers. There's a really big gap between, let's see if I can do this quickly. So there's, if you look at the curve, like y-axis, x-axis, if you look at the curve over time of number of contributors increasing and quality increasing, what we notice is that there's actually an expertise gap, that this area shaded in the graph of these two lines ends up being the gap between number of contributors and number of contributors with expertise. I think with a lot of other SIGs that there's a certain amount of training that constitutes a floor to entry into the SIG. Like not a lot of people, maybe this is not the case, but I can't imagine a lot of people showing up to like SIG CLI and saying, I'm brand new, I'm not a coder, I want to contribute. But with Docs, that is often the case because it's perceived both accurately and inaccurately as a place where you don't need to be technical to contribute. And it's gross, but that's the language that people use. That face, Gwen, is very accurate.
I'm snapping. That is like I have to know Git and Markdown to do Docs.
And Hugo.
I'm snapping. I'm sorry.
And Go to deal with shortcodes. So there's a gap. We have any number of people who would love to contribute, but who don't have the expertise in order to be able to do so meaningfully with contributions to like information architecture. When we have good first issues, people snap them up very quickly. Things that are well-bounded, discrete, time-boxed, things that are wholly self-disclosing. Those tend to go very quickly. But people who are capable of making informed judgments about ambiguous material, that's where the gap happens. And there's really, and this is, in some ways, this is like a profession-wide gap with technical documentation. There's really no effective or standard way to train people to bridge that gap. And this is where I plug in advance the book proposal that I'm putting together to try and standardize a way to bridge that gap. Coming to O'Reilly 2021.
Yeah.
Plug.
Get me pre-order information.
Jeez, you
Yeah, seriously. So question on that, because I dipped my toe into SIG Docs when I started off, and one of the things that I tried to tackle was like updating old documentation and didn't have like appropriate context on all that stuff. I probably do now, but those issues are stale. But what I'm thinking of is, how do we maybe do the reverse? How do we train people to be good doxifiers, I guess, that are already in other SIGs, right? How can we? Because I think that like the bridge between like finding people who are technical experts in the content that's already laid down there, they probably already exist in SIG. So like, how do we do it in reverse, maybe?
So we have docs contribution guidelines. We're in this sort of weird cycle where they go from being exceptionally well maintained to scaling out to requiring maintenance again to make them fresh, and that's where we are. We've got a technical writer, Celeste Horgan, who's currently working on refactoring that content. So like the content is there. It occasionally needs refactoring, but I mean that content is there that wasn't there in a way, Stephen, when you were like newish. But like a fun fact, during the release cycle, it happens without fail. There are feature developers who see the docs deadline in advance, and like it's a small number, like between 2 and 4, who open their docs PRs like within the first week. They've got their placeholders open, they bang stuff out, and then like everyone else, it's a fight to the finish to get docs PRs in. Whether that correlates meaningfully to resources, or if that doesn't correlate at all, I don't know, but it's interesting to observe.
So something I had mentioned to Jim, and not to go crazy on the docs portion, but like something I'd mentioned to Jim is like, it'd be interesting if there was a way somehow programmatically maybe to trigger, oh, maybe this doc has not been updated in 3 months or something like that. Maybe someone should take a look at it. And like there are owners that are subject matter, like that might already be configured, I don't know. But being able to say like, maybe an issue opens that's flagged with the SIG, or I don't know. Like if you take the CNI docs, maybe like the CNI docs could probably use updates.
We have no automation for that right now, but it is very much something that we've discussed, and something that I think has strong consensus to implement.
There's something for I feel like there was something for a process around the internationalizations where people had a way of kind of cycling and seeing that stuff had happened in one and making it come over into the others.
It's a manual script that runs a diff between like one branch and another. So I mean, that's possible to do. We could automate that like on a per release basis. So that's, if I were going to do it, that would be where I would start looking. But that is, yeah, that's a good prompt, and thank you.
All right, I got to time box us. So clearly good discussion, and let's go around really quick and do a round robin with, I want to know exactly the types of contributors that you're looking for right now in your group. Examples, get down to like XYZ component needs approvers direly, things that are on the top of your head right now. If you say skip, do me a favor and put it in later in the notes. I'm very curious. So Bob, you're just first on my thumbnail here. What's Contrib-X looking for?
I would say honestly right now, people to go through and audit and update the developer guide. And there's been a whole slew of stuff that hasn't been updated in a while. Something just came up the other day where, you know, things were referencing, I think it was a hack e2e.go instead of, you know, cube test, and there's just all sorts of bits that we need like people to go through and actually sort of like audit and update that documentation. And sort of like ideally the same thing with the contributor guide, but to a lesser extent. We do have like Visha going through there. There's some other just like even just like installing, getting the developer environments a little bit more complicated right now with OS X now ditching Bash, so you have to be able to like install Bash if you want to do some of this stuff, and essentially go through the docs and update it.
David Eads. What are
My
y'all?
ideal contributor would be someone with a deep understanding of Cube primitives, who has a good understanding of multi-node parallel programming and would be able to resolve problems like in the garbage collection controller, they're going to require changing and migrating core metadata APIs. That would be my ideal contributor.
So are you ultimately looking for people to own this too? So like more approvers in this area?
Not really. We basically have like 3 people who can go through and modify the code. I'd be looking for them to prove that they can do it all first.
Oh, right. I mean, I'm not saying like we're going to advertise, immediate approvers or anything crazy like that. I'm just saying, like, is this like some kind of short-term need that you have, or would this eventually lead into longer sustainability and growth areas, like adding eventually approvers?
Once you have a knowledge of those basics, you can essentially go off and write any API or any controller that exists in this project today. So once you know how to do this, you can do anything.
All right. And Mo, what's going on in Auth world?
Sorry, I had to unmute. I like how David said, I basically want me. I'm picking on you, David. So for Auth, I think there's some sort of out of project work. Like, so we've been working on like API audiences for tokens for a long time. I think one of the foundational pieces that was left was we want to make sure that other language projects that consume like service account tokens, like know how to reload tokens off of disk. So, that's really cross-cutting, right? It's not Go code, it's Python code, Java code, random stuff. So like we don't control those community projects that they're not even the Kubernetes community. So certainly like having an understanding of how that's sort of coming along would help us. Like, I don't think we can really move to the, I don't think we can require the changes that we want to require until we kind of have a bit more stronger consensus. Other things are like, I know it was pretty contentious at last KubeCon. The chairs and we talked about sort of the future of PSPs. I do think, like, I know Tim had wanted to do some proof of concepts for like what sort of the next thing might look like, but I know he's also really busy and hasn't necessarily had a chance to make one. So that might be a place that if someone has a background in policy, they could work on. Certainly you would have to sort of gain understanding of Kubernetes intrinsics, but you can build this out of tree, so that would be fine. I know the dynamic audit policy work kind of stalled out a little bit. It's kind of, we don't necessarily have that many people working on it, and I think it's on like version 2 now or 3, like 3 iterations of going back and forth. And I know there's a strong desire to have it sort of be built out of tree. And then if the APIs make sense and they can go through API review, we could bring it into tree. But I don't think anyone's actively trying to take the last bit of feedback that we had and try to go build it out. So there's these sort of things that come to mind. Sorry.
You need my guy to be able to write the API changes you make for your dynamic audit.
Yeah, I know, right? Like that's the thing, right? Like, I like to joke. The only reason I know anything about API machinery is because you need to know it to get anything done in Q.
That's a good line. What are other, just because of time, we can't do everyone now. Any other groups that are immediately like looking for people of all varieties, whether it's new contributor, approver, like people to grow into approvers? Anybody else want to shout out stuff that they're doing or looking for rather?
Project managers. I think across the board in the project we could do with people who are interested in taming the collective backlogs. There was an issue that I probably have to go look at again. One around issue triage, so resurrecting that one to make it easier to triage issues cross SIG for Kubernetes at the very least, and then seeing how that can play across repos. There's also a project board plugin that someone was working on at some point a while ago. One of my biggest pains is that when an issue gets open, it doesn't land anywhere. So before my SIG meeting, I have to make sure it's on the project board. I have to make sure it's accurately prioritized and so on and so forth. If there was someone doing that or someone working on automation around that, that'd be super dope. Yeah.
We should have triage and that kind of stuff as like a whole topic for our meeting.
Yeah.
How everybody's doing triage and like where we could help each other and stuff like that.
I think by next meeting I can have something going. There are a few proposals floating around. I can try to shape them up before the next meeting.
All right. Okay, just for the sake of time, and if anybody else is looking for stuff, please list it there. There is a eventual purpose for this stuff, but definitely add it there. All right, so I wanted to at least give a quick how-to of using and utilizing group mentoring techniques to get more reviewers and approvers for certain areas. So if you're finding that some of your owners' files only have one individual in it, or if they're stale or whatever, and you're realizing, hey, I have areas that we really need reviewers and approvers on, group mentoring can really help you. So the formula is pretty broad, and it's broad because you could customize it. This is where we tried when we did some initial tests to make this as specific as possible, but we realized that we boxed ourselves in a lot of ways. So we undid a lot of the components to the program and sort of giving a a la carte, if you will, as long as it involves some of this formula. So the formula is ask. So obviously you need to get the word out that you're looking for people in certain areas. Not today, aka you're not jumping the ladder. You're still going through the ladder. And they still have to gain trust with you and things like that. But hey, eventually 6 months or so down the line, I'd like to, based on performance, get folks that are interested in helping us maintain this certain area. So you ask, and that's the customization. How you ask, that's up to you. You have the same goal. Everybody is going to have the same goal. So if you're looking for more reviewers, the goal at this end of the certain determined time period is more reviewers. So obviously you would need to get members, current members, to go to a reviewer status. And then Slack is actually the key ingredient here, and I'm going to show that to you in a second. The ideal, again, because we've done some testing here, the ideal is 3 mentors to 10 mentees in a group. So you can see that it's not a one-on-one situation. It is a group situation. So you're utilizing, this is, if you can see my screen right now, Slack. Yes, I have folks' approvals to do this. This was one of our test cohorts that we did from member to reviewer. And they were utilizing Slack stand-ups on a weekly basis for a 3-month time period. And their goal was to get to reviewer status at the end of that month. And what were they using? They were using the community membership guidelines that we have drafted already as their guidelines. So they're saying, for instance, one of them is 20 PRs. Yes, that's an arbitrary number, but at least gets the people to do the work. That's the ambiguous part that we keep telling people that they need to do here, is do the work. this gives some structure to that work, right? So you can see Lucas here having a Slack stand up with folks. And then they go in and say what they've reviewed. And then Lucas goes in and gives some kind of like many thanks. This is probably a bad example. I can go in and get some more where they're going back and forth on issues and things like that. So this is sort of a very broad way of doing this. And of course, you can have private Slack channels if folks are uncomfortable with like asking questions that they might consider low level, something along those lines. We also now have some generic group mentoring channels that we can utilize too. So staffing PR reviews for your SIG could be useful to you because you can push people to that channel if you're looking to get more reviewers and things, and then their peers will help you mentor them. That's the beauty about peer mentoring. And that's it for the how-to, that part. I know that was like, I wanted to spend a little bit more time, but that's what I got in 4 minutes. I did go ahead and update a lot of the upstream mentoring documentation that we have. Please take a look at that. And there are a couple groups that have already done this. Like I said, both on a testing level as well as some folks have implemented some parts of this. And that's cool. That's what it's all about. Take the part you want, not necessarily the parts that don't work for you. Questions, concerns, comments about group mentoring? Silence. All right. SIG docs, I know we're out of time. We can definitely still hang on. I don't have anything after this, but if anybody needs to drop, feel free. We will see you next month. But SIG docs, if y'all still want to hang on and talk about your open discussion, looks like we've got a chair transition, unless you already covered that.
Welcome, Caitlin. Yep, welcome.
Hey, Caitlin, welcome to the team.
Thank you.
I also added a monthly LOL for everyone. This is the last 12 months in meeting minutes in Zoom. So clusters, very chatty. SIG release, you're the next chattiest. SIG storage and Contrivex. But if you add in the Sarah Novotny, if you're like, what is the Sarah Novotny? If you're like, what is that? That's actually the Thursday community meeting. That was how Sarah had built it into the Zoom licenses. So that's it for February.
Later, y'all.
Later, taters. If anybody has questions or wants to talk, I'm still here. We can hang out. Everybody's like, I'm out.
I'll ask you a question, Paris, before I go.
Yeah.
On the mentoring thing, I didn't realize this when we were talking about the SIG chair stuff earlier. I don't think the word mentoring is mentioned in that doc at all.
No, you're right.
Now, is that because it's asking about chairs and not tech leads? Or is it a purposeful, like, we don't want to include that in the scope of that position?
Hold on, let's look at it together. All right. Yeah. So a lot of people would say that falls into this general thing right here, but I agree with you. I think that the role, this is like, I'm obviously speaking for people that aren't here right now. I think the role was originally chair specifically, again, not like combo tech lead, not just tech lead. Chair specifically was intended to legitimately run the operations, which sounds a lot like project management of said SIG. Mm-hmm. A lot of us do those mentoring components as well. So that's the stuff that I'm saying. Let's suss that stuff out and say, should it be a state, like, should it be in, like, should mentoring, for instance, be a part of the SIG chair role? That's the kind of the discussion that I think we should have. So do you think mentoring should or shouldn't?
I mean, since now you've told me for sure that this is chair and not chair plus tech lead and not tech lead, I could probably sort of go with chair doesn't have that, but
so you think tech lead does?
Yes. Like, at least to me, if the tech lead doesn't have it, then you don't have anyone left.
I think everyone has it, right? I think everyone is supposed to hold it. Like, at least in release, we started a role a few cycles back called the Emeritus Advisor, right? And
what?
yeah.
No, go ahead, keep going. I'm sorry, I'm muting myself because I just actually.
And that's essentially a role that's like it. We started it off as a former release team. I just realized I haven't had my camera on the entire time. So, hey everyone.
Yeah, I thought it was on purpose. I was like, he must be tired today. It's okay.
Yeah. We are doing 5 releases of Kubernetes right now. So, so the kind of the idea behind the Emeritus Advisor is that it is a former release team lead, or it started off as a former release team lead that would come back and give their sage wisdom about the process, right? Be around to help mentor shadows, to help keep the leads in line in terms of culling the backlog, things like that. Also, I think this cycle will have them be the primary for the retrospectives that we hold, right? Because I think between the cycle that they were on and the cycle that they're currently Emeritus Advisor for, they've got a lot of context of the history of the release team, right? So that's part of the reason that we brought that role into place. But I think that my wish for everyone who's on the release team and every role in general is that, like, one, the people on the release team go away. They go like to different SIGs. I think that each of the roles on the release team like lends itself to a different SIG, right? To CI signal testing, and enhancements, PM, right? And so on and so forth. Docs, right? But like allowing them to gain the knowledge in kind of this like gauntlet, essentially a 3-month gauntlet, and then go share some of the ideas that they have with different SIGs. So we've seen some of that happen, like definitely like Bob is a great example. Jim is a great example of people like working on enhancements, working on docs, figuring out how to bridge the gaps across multiple SIGs with the work that we do. But in that, I think I'd mentioned on the first call that there's kind of a requirement while you're on the release team, and this is not just for release team stuff, this is also like release engineering, that you learn the role while doing the role while teaching the role, right? And that's a tricky thing to ask someone to do in a quarter. But that's kind of our expectation, right? And the people who are doing that bubble up to be leads for those sections. So I think it's, for me at least, I think it's everyone's responsibility to try to be mentoring. Like I can't, I don't like the expectation that only the tech leads or only the chairs are doing that work. I think it's possible for everyone to do that work.
So do you think that's a byproduct of the fact that you guys sort of have a lot of, I don't want to use the word churn, but you have a lot of movement through positions? Like for SIG Auth, I don't necessarily think we do anything to grow the SIG, but at the same time, I don't know if any of us is particularly compelled to try to grow it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think there's
I'm
a lot
snapping so hard, y'all. Like, Mo, you just hit it. You hit it, Mo. You hit it. I'm sorry.
So, I mean, like,
sorry,
that's, yeah. That's kind of the life you're in when you start getting this kind of like special tribal knowledge, right? That you don't have unless you put some skin in the game for a while, right? And then it gets to a point where you're like, oh, all right, well, someone else should probably learn that, but do I have time to teach that person or write the doc to do that thing? So like, I don't think that it's a a lack of want to grow contributorship of the SIG. I think it's too many spoons, right?
I mean, at the same point, I don't think I've had anyone ask me, hey, I want to do SIG Auth. Like the most I've ever seen anyone say is like, yeah, I guess I should really attend those meetings. Like I should show up to those meetings. Like
that's what you should say. Hey, I'm Mo on whatever channel it is. Like we're looking for future reviewers for this SIG because I'm not gonna live forever. And I would like, and then that's when you create the programs around what you need, right? That's like there is no one program that fits all of our needs, right? So like, but then y'all are hitting on the spoons, and this is what I'm trying to suss out from these meetings, right? The suss out is who owns it, and what is a chair, and who are you? Like I know that sounds wild, but people have multiple hats. Like I see, yes, Steve. Like, come on, Steven wears multiple hats here.
Too many hats.
Yeah, I wear multiple hats.
Like, I have no idea how many hats we have on.
I have multiple hats as well, and I feel a lot of times we do conflate those hats sometimes, and that's why I feel like it's important that we're all on the same page about, okay, I'm a chair and this is my duties. And I think what a chair's duties actually are, like I think the chair is actually meta, and I think the chair is responsible for figuring out who the hell is responsible for figuring out mentoring.
I like that.
I think that's the chair. I think the chair is the meta. Like I feel like, because you as a chair, you all know you can't do all of these things, right? Like that's not a thing. Like the chair should be the ultimate delegator, in my opinion. Like, yeah, that's like, because it's like your grand central station already, right? Like Mo, you know what's going in and coming out.
Yeah.
You know,
you probably have. Sorry.
No, you go.
As the chair, like in sort of keeping an eye on all the things, but not necessarily a part of all the things, or working on all the things. You should be able to spot the things that are more friendly to this sort of thing, to bringing in new contributors or elevating more people to reviewers. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think this comes back to the do the work thing too, right? Like it's incredibly, and I mean this is a persona thing, right? This is a personality thing, right? So it's not easy to just I have a bunch of like brilliant or potentially brilliant or brilliant, but they just haven't had an opportunity to flex their muscle. Like there are issues that people are assigned to, and I have to, like, it's an issue that I have to come back to and like expound on exactly the problem that we're trying to solve so that someone can do it. And then there are other issues where, I mean, that's exactly the ask for me, but if someone else might have said, well, I tried this. And I'm like, oh my God, you did a thing. You did a thing that moved the ball forward. That was like actually exactly what I needed someone to do. Yeah. Right. And those are some of the people who have gotten promoted into different roles. Like we literally just did it for Daniel, right? So Daniel's now a release manager associate. He got in there and just started rewriting some of the release tooling, right? And Go. And I was like, that's what I needed. Like it was a problem that like, okay, we have maybe 15 tools or something to rewrite. I can't do them all by myself. No one has picked this up for years, basically, in the project. And then you have someone who comes in and just storms in and says like, I'm just going to start doing it. And like sometimes like that's what I need. Although there are still the other personalities where you want to raise them up, but you have to spend that time or figure out how to spend that time effectively with them, right? So like we do the release engineering calls. Well, we're like, I'll occasionally do a demo of some tool that we just refactored, or we'll do like a live release call where we'll walk through the staging and release process, and we'll do maybe one or two of those every cycle. Right?
That's actually something like I wanted to like bring up earlier that you've done an amazing job with, like when there is a tool or something like that, just going through and explaining everything as you're going through it is, incredibly worthwhile.
Yeah, I would second that.
I'm usually only doing these things when like it's fresh in my head. And then like, okay, it's committed to some recording, so we can dig it up later and you can watch the recording, right? I think the code base walkthrough playlist has been super awesome. So thanks for kicking that stuff off and being able to like just drop more things on that. I think in the mentorship, like I think the hardest thing is having the one-on-one time with people. So finding a way to do as much distributed mentorship as possible is huge.
And that's where I'm going with this group mentoring concept. Like, it doesn't need to be like hella formal. Like the thing I should put on the formula too is like open communication. Like that's the key there is like you've already set the expectations of here's the things that we look for in this role. And here's 3 months, try to do it. And then like you're giving constant feedback to that person. And the great thing that when we did the cohorts, the great thing that we found at the end was they already knew it or not. Like they were like, oh God, I didn't do any work. I'm not like, no way. Like you can, like you probably even saw, I don't know if you saw like, I don't know, you could probably see one. Look, been tied up with quite a bit of work, but trying to review some PRs when I get a chance, like, because people are checking in because of the Slack stand-up. So it's like they already know that, like, hey, I'm messing up right now. And like, so it's not like, at the end, like, there's like so much pressure of, oh no, I have to give somebody terrible feedback. It's just like, hey, you didn't quite match up to some other folks. So, whatever. So anyway, TLDR is you don't even have to necessarily give hard feedback as long as you're constantly giving feedback, like at a certain time period designation. And in Lucas's case, he would have Slack stand-ups like every Tuesday. So every Tuesday, Lucas would be on here and say, thread your Slack stand-up and let's do it. And like that would be Lucas's designated like day to like randomly check in. Like that, saving that like one-on-one back and forth time, like what you're saying, Stephen, is like through this kind of stand-up, if you will. And everybody that also signed up for the cohort also understands that like one of the reasons why they're signing up is because everybody's time is valuable. So that was the other thing, like one of the first meetings that we had with the cohort, we made sure everybody was on video so that everybody could introduce, like, get that camaraderie. This is what I was going to say, like in 10 minutes, but I only had 4 minutes. So like that camaraderie really like builds that up to be less of a burden on you as a mentor. So I would love to see this more widely adapted. Right now, it's just like Wednesday, Tuesday nonsense. Not nonsense, great nonsense. Great nonsense. But yeah.
So, yeah, so for release, at least we're trying to do, it hasn't started yet, but more, I guess, more shadow informationals between the leads and the shadows, making that more formalized. I think a lot of the chatter is kind of asynchronous. We did spin off a bunch of separate Slack channels for each of the like sub teams of the release team. It seems to be working well to the point where to the point where I'm not even sure anything that's going, like we're doing
welcome to group mentoring, homie. Welcome. Yes. Yeah, you did it. That's amazing. Oh my God, you did it. You didn't even realize you did it. That's like literally half the battle at Kubernetes is that we did it, or we've got the docs on it. We just have no idea where the hell it is. Like,
yeah.
Like,
so
you did it.
Gonna be honest, the Todoist has been helping out a lot. A new to-do app that I've been using. I know Bob, you're playing around with it too. But just the ability to like gamify your to-dos and have them listed in separate projects, so I could go back and look at what was going on in my list, and I'm gonna probably build some automation around that. But yeah, it's like I think the hardest part is I would love to, like, I'll do separate project boards for So say like PM will be, 2019 Q1 or yada, 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 right? And then we'll do separate done columns for, on the release side for done 118, done 117, right? It would be nice to be able to, I think, be kind of go with the work, and all of it's kind of sharded out in such a way that it's hard to aggregate what you've done over a cycle. It'd be really cool to be able to say like, this is what we accomplished. And I actually have a to-do list, a to-do item that says like, write up an email to the community about SIG release contributions over the last few cycles. And it's one of those things I'm like, well, first I have to aggregate them all, right? And but I think it would be cool to kind of like also have that where people can feel like their contributions are being valued on a larger stage by saying like, hey, these are all the things we accomplished, the SIG, like a SIG shout out kind of thing, right?
I'm trying to do some, well, I started creating the milestones, the community repo, just so we can have that sort of same sort of thing. Instead of that done column, just be able to look at the milestones, see what was done, like 118, 119. At least that's what I'd like to try and do for for things going forward.
Yeah.
So just curious, I'm hearing that y'all are loving Todoist. Are you dropping Trello, Stephen? I know you're big on Trello for a while, and I'm just curious because I love Trello.
I love Trello too. I'm using it for the Kubernetes Community Day in New York because more people are on Trello. It's a little easier to collaborate that way. But for personal stuff, yeah, I'm between Todoist and Google Reminders. I basically have to dump the Google Reminders into Todoist, and then it'll be Todoist wholly.
Cool. I'll have to give that check it out or what have you. I know like I was way too late in the game on doing like Gmail filters, and once I did that, it was like life changing on staying on top of stuff.
Back to Todoist. Jeff actually has something for like syncing GitHub and all that with Todoist. Although I think that mostly dropped, but could use some love. And I think once that's done, if there's enough of us using Todoist, that would be a good little thing.
I was going to ask, this is unrelated to the conversations of management. So one of the things I noticed when I started at VMware is they have a formal program for like spending like 40 hours a year volunteering. And I've considered like, I guess the Linux Foundation and the CNCF is a nonprofit. I've considered like if I should try to volunteer as a mentor and like explicitly do it that way, so it's not like part of my normal work stream.
Yes, I have like there's OSPOs out there in the world. I bet you like Tim Pepper. He's not on the line now, but talk to Tim because
George did it.
Yeah, OSPOs of the world work with the people internally, like the corporate people that like put on that volunteer stuff. And I know a lot of them are fighting for open source initiatives to go on the corporate related volunteering thing, whatever your program is, kind of like whether it's like 40 hours or, oh, we do it for a day or whatever it is, like definitely talk to your OSPO about that. And because I think that like you could either A, be an advocate or like B, see what happens. Like you could like be the crash test dummy. Whatever. But yeah, my advice would be yes, to do it, please. Be a trailblazer. And B, talk to OSPO about it.
Yeah, I got to say that because Bob and I were talking about it, GSOC, right? And we were talking about like some of the improvements for like the enhancements, SIG PM stuff. And he's like, oh, maybe it'd be a good idea to do like a GSOC project for that. And I was like, no, it's a terrible idea. It's a terrible idea because it kind of goes back to that mentorship thing, right? Like that's, I felt super bad about it because I was like, eventually maybe, but this is stuff that is not well enough defined for active contributors to even work on, right? So it's like the kind of thing that would break my heart to like put on an intern and then not see them deliver because they didn't have enough context to do it.
But if you set those expectations ahead of time?
Huh?
You want to hear my story? What if you set those expectations ahead of time? Meaning you tell the intern, look, it's kind of a shit show. This is the real world. And I'm going to guide you through this, not only me, but my group of homies around me. Like, so for Outreachy, that's kind of what we did with Vishka, right? Okay. So Vishka, we said, like, I wrote up the most bland job description. It was like 4 bullets, like, I am ashamed, right? Like, and the, like, literally, like, because I'm like, help me, everybody. And everybody's like, oh, great, it looks good. Ship it, great. Anyway, the bullets were just like really bland of like, you know, create a contributor site, update docs. So when we did the interview, when I did the interview with her, I said, the job description looks all over the place because that's the current state of things. And the end result though, that we're looking for is XYZ. So I feel like if we're communicating what the end result looks like and then giving them the resources to do it. So then I said, okay, let's take 30 minutes and I'm going to tell you all your resources. So we need, at the end of 3 months, a contributor site that has 3 features. And we also need some updates to our dev guide, right? So then I say, okay, here's Bob. Bob does XYZ. Here's George. George does XYZ. You know, here's our you know, meetings, whatever, and include them like the rest of us, right? And we definitely had bumps. Like I actually have some learning experiences, but it's going okay.